Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Angie and Republic of Work, for having us. And thanks, everyone who's joined us today. We're really excited to get to do this. So if you're here, it probably means that you're a business owner or you're part of a marketing department and you find yourself writing a lot on behalf of a brand. And we certainly don't need to tell you that, we all know how important written content is to running a business these days. And what we're up against is there's a lot of noise out there to compete with. So if a potential customer sees your content, on your social media or on your website or in an email, how do you stand out and get their attention? How do you get them to keep reading? How do you motivate them to learn more about you and about your offering? So it comes down to the words you use. It comes down to your copy. So what that means is that everyone who runs a business has kind of been forced into becoming a writer. And for a lot of us, that's not really something that we've trained for or we've prepared ourselves for. And it could even be that maybe the last time that you focused on your writing was when you were in school or in college. And the writing there tends to be very formal. It tends to be very particular about the rules of grammar. And it's just a style of writing that doesn't do very well in, the online marketing and the social media, the online world in general. It's kind of uptight and it's formal. But still, it's a tone of voice that a lot of brands have adopted. So how do you stand out? How do you make a genuine connection with your potential customers? You stand out by developing writing voice that is unique and relatable, because boring copy, boring corporate speak just isn't going to cut it anymore.
And your customers are literally crying out to hear your authentic voice. And there was a report came out that showed that 86% of people say that authenticity is important when deciding what brands that people like and what brands they want to support. And we know that this word authenticity gets thrown around an awful lot these days, and I don't know if what exactly does it mean. So for myself and Marci, it's really simple. It just means speaking like a human being. And when it comes to copy, it's about, writing content that sounds like one person talking to another person. And the problem is that when we sit down at a keyboard, whether it's because we see so much content that is stuffy and formal, or whether it's because when we sit at a keyboard, even though we're great at chatting with people face to face, there's no person immediately in that equation. And so we start to write, and it can so easily come out in that robotic tone that ends up sounding like everybody else. So what we're going to do today is we're going to give you 11 tips that you can start using immediately. They're the same tips that we use ourselves for our client work. When we started working together first, it was all websites, but our business has evolved to become really all about creating great content, helping our clients to create great content. And also Marci works on the copy for all of our clients' websites, emails, blog posts, social media. So really it's through great copy that we have helped our clients to increase their reach and engagement, to increase sales, and something that we think is really important, to nurture a thriving online community of their dream customers. So these are going to be really simple, practical tips that you can start using immediately. Basically, they are going to help you to write copy that stands out because it's personable, it's relatable, and most importantly, it's going to sound like you and not like anybody else out there.
Okay, so we'll jump right in. We've got 11 tips for you, and we are going to be starting out with kind of some simple, easy ones, and then they'll get meatier and juicier as we go along. So starting out with tip number 1, which is a very simple tip. Don't write it if you wouldn't say it. And this is just a good basic principle. You want to write in a way that sounds natural to you. So when you've written something, after you've written it, ask yourself, am I comfortable saying this aloud? And does it sound like me? So to give you an example, I would never write, hey dude, you should totally come to our talk on copy. It's going to be rad.
That was the social media post I made.
So I would never write that. And it's not because I think that's bad copy. I think that could be good copy for the right person. But, that's not the way I talk. That's not the way I talk to Frank. That's not the way I talk to our friends and family. That's not my personality. It just doesn't sound like me. But on the other hand, taking it to the other extreme, I would never write, upon receipt of your entry, I am pleased to inform you that you have been selected as the winner of our giveaway. Now, I do feel like that copy is weak. It's uptight. It has no soul. And thankfully, that I feel like that's not my personality either. And that doesn't sound natural coming from me. So the main takeaway for this tip is don't write it if you wouldn't say it. The main takeaway is that you want to fill your writing with personality. Just make sure that it's your personality and that you're staying true to your unique voice.
Cool. So tip number 2 is actually also a good way to check that you're doing tip number 1, because tip number 2 is read your work aloud. And that will basically check that it sounds like you. But also, you will often be amazed at how different it sounds. And once you start reading it out loud, you will discover that there are phrases that you stumble over, or there are just sentences that are sounding a bit clunky, and also identifying anything that you just wouldn't say in a million years. And this is where as well you start getting into, it does take more than one draft often to get things right. And so reading your work aloud is one really simple way to help you to get to a better second draft. All the great writers will tell you, I think it's a saying, a mantra, a proverb, I don't know what it's called. Anyway, writing is rewriting. So tip number 2, read your work aloud. Tip number 3 is me as well. I was handing over to Marci, and actually tip number 3 is me too. And that is get a second opinion from a second reader. So again, all the best writers, novelists, poets, whoever, they have trusted readers that they give their manuscripts to for a trusted opinion. And we realize we are very lucky because we work together. So everything that we write has a second reader. We realize it might not always be possible for you. And so, yes, it depends what you're writing. If you're doing a quick social media post and you don't have someone handy, may not be worth waiting. But on the other hand, if you're doing a blog post or an important email to your list, something like that, then it might be worthwhile doing your final draft and then getting a second reader to have a look at it. And it's even better if it's someone who isn't in the organization, because then you will also get feedback on what we call the curse of knowledge, which is where sometimes we know so much about our own business that we assume too much knowledge on the part of the reader. And so a second reader who isn't involved in the organization will pick up on things like that. They'll pick up on where you're not maybe quite been clear enough, or you've used an acronym that somebody outside your business isn't going to understand, things like that. So yeah, we always combine these actually, because I will write something and then I will say to Marci, can I read this to you? I'll read it to Marci out loud. That lets me hear the things that I'm stumbling over. I do a second draft and then I ask Marci to read that, and I get another raft of edits on the basis of that. So tip number 3, get a second opinion from a second reader, from a trusted reader.
Okay, tip number 4, be careful of cliches and common phrases. So you want to come to think of cliches like you would stale bread. You can make a sandwich with stale bread, but it's not going to be memorable or particularly pleasant. So it's very easy to slip into using a lot of cliches in your writing because they're so ingrained into our speech. And in conversation, cliches can be an easy way to make a point and move on. But in writing, they fall flat because there's just no originality to them. So we've got some slides for you. So you want to be careful that your sentences don't start sounding like these. So writing good copy is a piece of cake, or I avoid cliches like the plague. And then I wanted to come up with like a doozy of a phrase full or of a sentence full of cliches that, might be very easy for a business to write. So I came up with, at our company, we like to raise the bar by pushing the envelope and thinking outside the box. So that sentence is filled with cliches. And, if you study it, it's not really saying anything, definitely not saying anything original, and not really saying much at all. So you want to be careful of cliches, but you also want to watch out for, word combinations that maybe fit together a little too eagerly. So, sentences like, can I be brutally honest with you? Or her future is filled with golden opportunities. Or we'll be here for you to the bitter end. So all of these word pairings here, they're quite common, they're used a lot, and they just lack any originality. There are better ways you could come up with expressing the same thing. So, I want to advise you that if you don't get rid of any common phrase except one from your writing, this is the one I would say, get rid of this one straight away. It is the phrase, flip it over, I am delighted to announce that. And this phrase has become, will you scroll that up for me? Sorry. This phrase has become so common that I've turned it into a bit of a game. When I'm on social media, I've started counting the number of posts that start with, I am delighted to announce that, or, I am delighted to whatever. And I give myself extra points if I spot 2 or 3 in a row that start with this phrase. And I often do. It is that common. So why, and you can come back now. So why are cliches and common phrases bad for your copy? It's because they've been used so many times, they've lost their meaning. There's just no originality to them. There's no life in them. And they literally do not engage the brain. So there's been research to show that our brains light up in different areas when we're engaged by vivid original language. But when we hear or we read cliches, nothing but the language processor of the brain is engaged, and the rest of the brain is asleep, so to speak. Okay, so thank you. That was tip number 4, to be careful of cliches and common phrases. So if you're not using those, what are you filling your writing with? And that brings us to tip number 5, don't hold back the details. So you want to fill your writing with specific original detail, and you want to be visual as often as you can. So vague writing is boring. It gives us nothing to latch onto. I came across a really good example of this a few weeks ago. I was watching Joyce Carol Oates, the writer Joyce Carol Oates, on her masterclass. She has a great masterclass on writing short stories. And she was talking about the novelist Virginia Woolf. And she was talking about how eloquent and, just the beautiful writing Woolf does in her novels, and how it's so different from the way Woolf writes in her journal. And she was saying, Joyce Carol Oates was saying that in her journal, Virginia Woolf is sharp, she's catty and nasty. And as soon as Oates said sharp, catty, and nasty, I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting. I want to know, what is she talking about? And I was so afraid she wasn't going to give any details, but thankfully she did. So Oates ended up reading an excerpt from Virginia Woolf's journal. Woolf was writing about these 2 ladies that had come to her house for a visit, and she had written, my impression of these 2 ladies were of great lumps of gray coats and shabby handbags. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Because, that's just such vivid descriptive detail there. Woolf could have written, I found these ladies very dull and boring, and that would have been vague writing. And it's just so much more entertaining to say, my impressions of these 2 ladies were of great lumps of gray coats and shabby handbags. So that's the type of detail that you want to get into. So we'll look at some examples. So this is an example of a vague sentence. Every day was a struggle during that period of my life. So not really detail there. We don't really know what's going on or what that looks like. But if you were to take the same sentiment and to fill it with specific original detail, we could write, for an entire year, I cried every morning as I ate my cornflakes. By lunch, I was so stressed, all I could manage to keep down was a kid-sized portion of applesauce. And come evening, first thing I'd do when I got home was crawl under my duvet before I'd even taken off my coat or shoes. So there's just so much more richness to that sentence, or sentences. I think it's more than one sentence. There's so much more richness there because there's more detail. It paints a vivid, specific picture, and we can tell, okay, this person is really struggling to get through their day. Okay, we'll look at another example. This is an example of a vague sentence that's lacking detail. We're committed to helping you live your best life. And this is the type of sentence that, if you're in the online business world, you're probably coming across sentences like this all the time. So again, no detail there. Don't really know what they're talking about or what they mean. They could mean any number of things. But if we add some detail, some specific original detail to the sentence, we won't stop until we've figured out your dream career and how it's going to make you money. So immediately, that second sentence is more interesting to me because I know exactly what they're talking about and exactly what they're offering me. Okay, we'll look at one more example. So a vague sentence here, time to make choices that positively impact your health. And if we were to fill that with specific original detail, we could write, listen to your body. It's begging you to give up the smoking, make broccoli a recurring star of your meals, and start taking that morning run. So immediately, that second sentence is more interesting than time to make choices that positively impact your health, which, there's nothing to grip onto there. It paints no picture for us. So not only should you watch out for writing vague sentences, but there are a few buzzwords that you'll come across in business writing. These words pop up all the time, and they just don't mean much on their own. So it's words like passionate, power, empowered, innovative, streamlined, goals-driven, and actually any word that has driven tacked on to the end, like mission-driven, results-driven, value-driven, action-driven. And I'm not saying that you should never use these words. It's just that a lot of business owners will use these words and they'll stop there. They'll say, I'm a very passionate business owner. It's like, well, yeah, you and 97% of the other business owners out there. So you really want to push yourself. What can you say around these words that is unique and specific to you? So dig deeper. What do you specifically mean?
Cool. So tip number 6 is also about stripping out some additional words. Tip number 6 is watch out for wordiness. And this is about getting rid of words that Marci calls wordy words.
Wordy words.
I've no idea how many times I just said the word words. Okay, so wordy words are basically words that don't really add anything specific, and they're just weakening your point. And a lot of them tend to be qualifiers, and they're words and word pairings like kind of, sort of, a bit, really, very, quite, somewhat, fairly, actually, things like that. This tip helped me a lot, but I will admit, when I first started doing this, it was a bit disconcerting because I would strip out the wordy words and then I would be left looking at my text thinking, there's not much left here. But it's a good thing because it gets you focused on what the meat of what you're saying is, what the value of what you're saying is, and it gets you to beef up the real value in your content rather than adding wordy words to just string it out. So again, let's just have a quick look at some examples so that you can see what we're actually talking about here. So here we have one that's got the wordy words in it. Digital marketing can be a bit difficult when you're just getting started, but it can actually become quite a powerful tool when you're looking to attract your dream customers. So if we strip out the wordy words, and you can see there what we've stripped out, and we get to the much punchier, the meat of what we're saying, Digital marketing can be difficult when you're getting started, but it can become a powerful tool for attracting your dream customers. So to the point, punchy, clear, crisp, lovely. Another quick example. So here we have with Wordy Words, you'll learn how to really ensure your Facebook page actually attracts lots of your dream customers and very much supports your business goals. So let's strip out the wordy words and we get, you'll learn how to ensure your Facebook page attracts your dream customers and supports your business goals. This also leads me to point number 7, which is stay simple and clear. So by stripping out those wordy words, you're getting closer to clarity and simplicity. But also you can opt for simple words over complicated words. And more often than not, simple short sentences are much better than the type of long, complicated run-on sentences that I love to write and that Marci points out to me and says, you know, this could probably be 3 separate sentences and it would be a lot clearer. And she's right. Also, for reading on the web, always include lots of line breaks. It just adds in a little bit of breathing space, gives a bit of white space around your text, much more inviting than big blocks of text, and it tends to keep the eye moving through your content a lot better as well. And then the last thing in terms of staying simple and clear is that overall it tends to be better to tackle a single point per post or article or email to your list, whatever it is you're writing. If you tackle one point and combine it with a clear call to action, it's much better than causing information overload for your readers. So yeah, tip number 7, stay simple and clear.
Great. So tip number 8. For tip number 8, we're going to get into a little bit of grammar, but it's nothing scary. And
it's a little bit scary.
It's nothing scary, and it's going to be over very, very soon. So tip number 8 is go with active voice over passive voice. So active voice has more energy and pop and life in it. And for people who are into their grammar rules, the way you recognize active voice is when a verb in the past tense is paired with any form of to be. For instance, the toast was eaten, or paired with any form of get, my wallet got stolen. Okay, we are going to look at some examples. Some examples are really useful in this instance. So this is a sentence in the passive voice. New employees were hired by our company last week. So that were hired puts it in the passive voice. And if we were to rewrite that, putting it in the active voice, we would have, what would we have? Oh. Our company hired new employees last week. So we bring our company to the front. We can lose the were because it's the company doing the hiring, or who did the hiring. So our company hired new employees last week. And you can just see the difference between the top sentence and the bottom one. The one in the active voice just has, it's punchier, it's more compelling, it has more energy to it. So next example, we have passive voice. This product was developed after a lot of research was done. So we've actually got 2 examples of passive voice there, was developed and was done. If we rewrite that in the active voice, we get, I developed this product after doing a lot of research. Go to one more example here. So you will be guided through 3 meditations. That's the passive voice. And if we put that in active voice, we have, I'll guide you through 3 meditations. So you can see the difference there is that the active voice puts the focus on the person. In this case, it's a person, the person or the thing doing the action. So it assigns responsibility to the person or the thing doing the action. And that will, you can stop sharing screen now. So if you read any books to do with language, usage of the English language, they will, almost all of them will cite this example when they're talking about the difference between passive voice and active voice. They'll talk about, if you listen to politicians, you will hear a politician use the passive voice and say, mistakes were made. So that's an example of a sentence in the passive voice. Mistakes were made. And you're much more likely to hear a politician say that than to say, I made mistakes. And that's how you would put that sentence in the active voice, by saying, I made mistakes. So like I said, the active voice assigns responsibility to the person or the thing doing the action. And it just, you know, there's more life and more energy in active voice. Now, having said all that, I'm not saying that passive voice is wrong or that you should never use it. There are instances where it makes sense. Instead of, you know, getting into all of that detail today, you know, it's easy enough to do an online search and read a little bit about the difference between active and passive voice to come to grips with all of that. But in general, when you're doing your copywriting, you know, you will come across as way more compelling and way more energetic if you favor the active voice over the passive voice. Okay, that wasn't scary at all.
Except for the grammar bit. Okay, so this is actually, we're coming to, these are probably my two favorite tips to share personally. So this is tip number 9, and this one was a big light bulb moment for me. And I guess the thing is that it often takes me a while to warm up when I'm writing. So when I actually get Marci to read it, she'll point out that I could get to the main point a hell of a lot sooner. So I tend to have these kind of warm up paragraphs at the start of my text. And quite often they can just be ditched. And when Marci pointed this out to me, I realized that I'd actually heard this before, but I had never thought of applying it, because when I heard it, it was to do with script writing. And it was when I was at a masterclass with David Simon in Dublin in, I think it was 2008, maybe. And I assume everyone probably knows who David Simon is. He is most famous as the creator of The Wire. He's a writer and a producer, and he's also created shows like Generation Kill, Show Me a Hero, which is fantastic, by the way, The Juice, and then I think his most recent one was The Plot Against America. And what he said was, get in late, get out early. So that's tip number 9, get in late, get out early. And what he meant was that when you're writing a scene, he said a lot of writers, they'll tend to, you know, they'll be writing a scene, it might be a conversation between two people, and they'll write the entire conversation starting with, hey, how's it going? How are you? Good. Yeah. How'd you get on yesterday? Yeah, not too bad, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And hey, did you hear what happened to such and such yesterday? And that's when they get to the point that is relevant to the plot. And then they taper out the conversation with the, yeah, okay, well, I'll chat to you soon. Great, brilliant, bye, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he was saying, you want to get into the scene as late as possible while still having the scene make sense, and get out as early as possible while still having the scene make sense. And basically, it's the same when you're writing any type of content. A lot of the time, you can examine your content and realize, like me, that you can just ditch the first couple of paragraphs. And another way that people often add unnecessary content to the top of their writings or their posts. I guess this one is kind of particular to posts, really, because you'll see a lot of people writing about the fact that writing a post, like I'm just hopping on Facebook now to write a quick post to tell you that we're giving a talk, blah, 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 blah. So all that stuff about popping on Facebook and writing the post is, you know, completely irrelevant to the main meat of the topic, which is that you're giving a talk. Or, you know, also people can tend to add a lot of background stuff like, oh, we've been really, really busy lately. We've got lots going on and everything's all hustle and bustle around here. So you haven't heard from us in a while, but we're just popping on now to tell you that we're giving a talk as part of the Lunch and Learn, blah, blah, blah. So all of that, you know, all that fluff, all that stuff can just be whipped out. And basically, if you're anything like me, once you start assessing how late you can get in, you'll see just how often you write openings that just aren't needed at all. And it tends to be as well that the longer form content, the more content you've written at the start that just isn't needed, or that's my experience anyway. And then as far as the ending goes, in terms of getting out early, it's really useful if you have done your planning ahead of time, so you know what the main purpose of your post is, and that way you know when you've made your point, so you know what the earliest point is that you can actually get out. If you don't know the main purpose or point of what you're writing, if you just kind of sit down and think, okay, I'm gonna write something now, and you just start writing, it becomes far too easy to ramble on and on and on and never actually know, how do you get out early, because you never actually know where your exit point is or when you've made your point. So when you're doing your rewrites, just remember, get in late, get out early, and just assess, is there stuff at the start that you can whip off? Is there stuff at the end that doesn't need to be there? So this brings us to tip number 10, and this is a good one. This is follow basic story structure. This is invaluable. So our brains are hardwired for story. Our brains have basically evolved to process information and make sense of the world through story. So I'm not going to go into massive detail here because I'm not a brain scientist and I'll get it all wrong. But if you want a really good read about it, I'd highly recommend Will Storr's book called The Science of Storytelling. And there is science behind it. So just very, very briefly, Marci kind of alluded to this earlier as well, but reading facts lights up, I think it's like 2 parts of the brain to do with processing. But when you read stories, all different parts of your brain light up. And what happens is it makes it really similar to experiencing what you're reading about, which I just think that's incredible, that you can basically share an experience with someone just by writing about it and having them read it. On top of that, if it provokes an emotional response, you get a dopamine hit, which means that the experience is pleasurable. And then the last point I wanted to make on kind of the science behind it is just that studies have shown that storytelling can increase retention of information by up to 70%. Because our brains love patterns, they love structure. And if you use story structure, it kind of creates this cause and effect sequence that the brain enjoys following. And so people keep reading for longer. So, okay, so story is, you should be using story, it's great, there's science behind it, but how do you actually use it? So, one of the best definitions of story that I've found, I'm going to share with you now, because in order to use story structure, we need to define what a story is and then use that to structure our posts. So the best definition that I've found is a character striving to overcome obstacles to achieve a goal and experiencing transformation as a result. So when you're planning your content, you can use this as a template, like a fill in the blanks. So you want to fill in the character. Now that will basically be your dream customer, or it could be you, or it could be, somebody that, it could be about a person, as long as your dream customer can basically identify with that person and put themselves in their shoes. So you've got character, you've got what their goal is, what the obstacles are in the way of that goal, and what transformation they're going to experience as a result of the entire thing. So I will show you a quick example. Here is an ad that was running for, Marie Forleo was running this ad. If you don't know Marie Forleo, I'm sure a lot of you do, you must do. If you don't, check her out, she's amazing. So this ad says, you don't need thousands of dollars in the bank or a fancy investor. If you've been dreaming of starting or growing a business, this guide is for you. Download my free checklist and discover over 322 free tools that you can use to start and grow your dream business. Now, the ad could have just said, download my free list of over 322 tools. The way that it uses story structure is that, so you've got the character of the customer that Marie Forleo is trying to attract. You've got the goal. The goal is to start or grow a business. The obstacles are no money or investors. And then the transformation is that you can get the free tools you need to start and grow your business. So the character, goal, obstacle, transformation is like your plot basically, and then you write your content around that structure.
And she's done this in 3 sentences. It's not that you need loads and loads of text to follow story structure.
Exactly. But if we were to look at a longer example, we will look at a more verbose one that this is a post that I did about this talk. And it says, "That's me there doing my best acting in a recent audition. As an actor, you spend a lot of time learning how to bring yourself fully to the role and leave your ego out of it so that you're free to make silly faces like this when it's right for the part. Between my acting experience, making videos for our business, and endless Zooms, I'm pretty comfortable by now showing up as myself on video. I find it harder with the written word. You don't have to worry about finding your voice when you're creating video because, well, it's your voice. You've been using it to talk since you were about 10 months old. But how do you make your writing sound like you? How do you stop sounding stuffy and formal? What makes someone want to read to the end? These are all things that I'm working on, but luckily I have a great teacher, Marci, who is an excellent writer. If you want to learn all the tips that I've picked up from Marci and one I picked up from David Simon, yes, that David Simon, then you should come to our utterly and completely free talk organized by Republic of Work. It's called Captivating Copy, How to Write Content Your Customers Will Love, and it's on Tuesday, the 6th of April at 1 p.m. We would love to see you there, so leave a comment below if you sign up, and we'll look out for you. So, story structure. The character here is me, but anybody who is trying to write better content for their business is going to relate to this. The goal is to write as easily as I talk. The obstacles are not sounding like myself, sounding too formal, nobody's reading my posts. And the transformation is that I use these tips to learn to write captivating copy that our dream customers love. And I'd just like to point out as well that here in this one, I've combined story structure with personal stories. So I have included, the fact that I was doing an audition, that I'm also an actor. So there's a lot of personal detail in there as well. And to me, that is the ultimate, combining story structure with personal story, but for your supporting your business goals. That for me is the ultimate.
Okay, so we're on to the last tip, but just before we move on, I do want to say that, Frank is lavishing me with praise as a writer and kind of tearing himself down, but he's a really good copywriter and he's an excellent editor. It's thanks to his editing skills that I've improved as much as I have over the last few years.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay, so tip number 11, our very last tip, and probably my favorite. This tip is to make it your own. So the content you're sharing, how can you share it from your original point of view? And this is something that is becoming more and more important, especially if you're in an overpopulated field. And, with the online world the way it is today, most of us are in an overpopulated field. So the information we're sharing could be, similar to the same information our competitors are sharing, the same basic knowledge, the same basic teachings. But that doesn't mean you have to, find something completely original to say. It just means you have to find an original way to say it. And a great source to look for how to make your content your own, a great source to dig into is, stories, your personal stories or your personal experiences. And just to explain kind of how this works in action, I'll give you an example. So something that we teach that a lot of our competitors and peers in this, in the online marketing world teach as well, is that, most websites for a business, especially, small businesses who maybe they've done their own website, most of these websites are just overcrowded with information, too much information on them. It's not presented in kind of a clear, logical way. There's no thought to what's actually relevant to their customers and what their customers are going to find interesting. So their websites actually end up working against their business instead of working for their business. So that's, something we wanted to teach about. And I decided to write an email about that point. And I could have just said it as I said it just there. I could have said those words, I could have written those words exactly, but then it would have sounded pretty much exactly the same as everyone else in our space, what they're saying. So instead, I wrote an email to our list about this, and I know a good handful of people here are on our email list, so you've probably read this email. The subject line is, "Don't make a peanut butter guacamole sandwich." And in the email, I talk about one summer I was taking care of this little girl, and every day we'd go to the park for a picnic. So I'd pack a picnic lunch for us. And one day it was raining and we couldn't get out of the house. And I thought, you know what, we're still going to have our picnic. We're just going to have it indoors instead. And since we were staying put, I thought it'll be fun if we, instead of me making the sandwiches ahead of time, it'd be fun if, I just sliced some bread and put out some toppings or some fillings, and we could just make our sandwiches ourselves as we went along. So I put out a selection of savory fillings. I had guacamole, tomato, cheese, and hummus. And I had a selection of sweet fillings like Nutella, banana, peanut butter, honey. And my idea was that, we'd make our savory sandwich and that would be our main course. And then we'd make our sweet sandwich and that would be our dessert. So I was very surprised. What I had not expected to happen was for the little girl to take pretty much every filling available to her and make this like one massive sandwich. And she was just so proud of it. So she presented to me this sandwich that was like guacamole, peanut butter, tomato, honey, cheese, Nutella, banana. And she was just so proud. And she was like, "Look at this. Do you want a bite?" And, I think I said to her, like, "Oh, no, that's okay. Thank you. You have that. You enjoy that." And then, of course, on the inside, I was like, "Oh, my goodness, there is no way that sandwich is coming anywhere near my mouth." So in the email, the way I tied this all back into our teaching point was I said, most business owners doing their own website are like the little girl, where they're just, really excited about all the information available to them. They take it all, they pile it onto their website, and then they're just really proud of, the way their website looks and the amount of information that's on there. And then, of course, I am like the potential customers who arrive on the website. You see something that is just way too much, that is not at all appealing. And it's like, there's no way I'll be able to digest this. And, you just get out of there and potentially never return to see if the content has improved. So that's, that's an example of how you can take something that everyone else is sharing, but put it in, make it your own, tell it from your own original point of view, because all of our competitors can say, don't overload your website with information, but only we can say, don't make a peanut butter guacamole sandwich.
Cool. So there you have it. 11 practical tips to help you to find your unique voice, to be more clear and more relatable in your writing. And this will result in higher engagement because you are not sounding like just another brand. You will stand out from the noise by amplifying what's unique about you and what's unique about your offering. We would love if you would sign up to get our emails. We share lots more easy and practical tips, but also you will get to see everything that we talked about today in action, because these are all tips that we follow ourselves, that we use every time we sit down to write. So you can do that at frankandmarci.com/emails. And we also, what we send our emails, we don't believe in newsletters. We send emails, so you can reply to us and contact us just by replying to any of those emails to chat about the content and chat about what's in it. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
We would love to see if there are any questions and see if we can answer them for you.
I saw in the chat box earlier that someone said they often find themselves rushed and not being able to pay attention to their writing when it needs to be really impactful. I don't know who was that? It's hard to find now, sorry.
Sure. Yeah, that, I mean, that's a big one. And that is something else that we usually end up chatting about with our clients. And really what it comes down to is that we have a tendency to think about our businesses as, the things like the client work, primarily the client work really, and the planning of the actual work and the doing of the actual work, and then the marketing is kind of this other thing over here. And so really, I think we both believe that the only way to tackle that particular problem is to pull marketing back into the under the umbrella of what the business is. So it's not like the business and then there's the marketing. The marketing has to become an integral part of the business, and you have to carve out time to actually spend on the crafting of your content, and realize, because I think there's a tendency to feel like that's not the work, that's not real work, but it really is, and it's vital work if you want to grow and attract new customers. So I think really, unfortunately, that is the answer to that one. I say unfortunately just because it's not an easy answer, but it is one that works. So it is just carving out that time and respecting that time.
And then kind of related to that as well is, often when you sit down to do your social media work or to write your emails or whatever, if you haven't done any prep, if you haven't been kind of taking stock of ideas, if you're just sitting down to a blank canvas, that can end up taking a lot of time, just generating ideas. So we would encourage you to get really used to, having, like a note-taking app within easy reach, or even, going old school and having a notebook. And just whenever an idea for content, crosses your mind, just to jot that down straight away. And don't do like me and jot down something really obscure that when you're looking at later, it's like, I have no clue what I meant. But, take the time to kind of explain what your idea is and the point you want to make. And that can speed up the process of when you're sitting down to actually do the writing. You're not starting, from complete scratch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, guys. And there's a couple of more questions here. So Diane was wondering how important it is for people to be involved in writing their own copy.
I mean, it is a personal choice, but we feel like if you can get good at writing your own copy, then you've got it made, because there's just no one who is going to be able to, embody your voice the way you would, and, get your personality or your brand's personality into your words. Because, for us, copy, the goal of copy is to nurture a relationship with the person reading the copy, which, most of the time is going to be someone who either is a customer or you hope will be a customer. And that's just something, if you can learn to, express your own ideas, to get people excited about your ideas and your work, if you can learn to do that through copy, it's just such a powerful tool to be able to do yourself.
Yeah, and I think it does depend a little bit as well on the the size of your organization. So obviously for larger brands, it becomes easier in a way to get a copywriter to work for you, because there will be a defined brand voice that you can hand to a copywriter, and that they can use that brand voice to develop content for you. But if you are a smaller business, then more often than not, you are the face of your business, you are representing the business, and it becomes that bit harder or trickier to figure out where that line is between you representing the business and handing off to a copywriter.
Oh, thank you. And then, okay, we have a couple more. So this goes back to the active and passive voice, I think. So it says, when writing content, should you say I or we when talking about your business?
Well, I think that totally depends on, if you're a one-person business, then it does make sense to say I, especially, if you're a personal brand, you can start putting yourself out there in front of your content and saying I. I know some one-person businesses feel more comfortable saying we. I think they want to give the impression that there's a team of people working. We say we because there is two of us. And, if you are a larger organization, it does make sense to say we. But I think, if you don't have a strong reason for not saying I, and you are a one-person business, then definitely, use I, and then it is like a person-to-person connection that you're establishing through your copy.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the last one that we have is, you just mentioned that you don't believe in newsletters. Can you say something more about that?
Oh yeah, sorry, I probably should have clarified that actually. So what we find is a lot of the time people have email lists and they're sending out emails weekly or monthly or whatever, or actually a lot of the time they'll have a list and they're just never sending out emails. That happens a lot too. But when people are sending emails, we find that they are, a lot of the time, they'll be sending out these very beautifully designed newsletters, using maybe a newsletter template on maybe MailChimp or MailerLite or whatever service they're using. And they'll have very pretty images, and they'll be tackling, like, there'll be about 8 different things in the newsletter with 8 different images and 8 different headings. And really, again, unless you're a big e-commerce brand, unless you're Amazon highlighting your 8 top deals this week, most of the time, we believe that most small businesses are going to be better served by more direct communication with their customers and their potential customers, or as we like to call them, their dream customers. So we use what we do is we use the simplest possible template so that the emails going out to the list look like normal emails, and communicate person to person, just as you would if you were actually just sitting down at Gmail or whatever and sending an email to someone. We try and replicate that experience as much as possible, because we want that authenticity. We want that human voice, person to person.
Yeah, and we just find as well, like when in terms of the terms you use, newsletter versus email, when you think, well, I'm sending a newsletter, that sounds kind of very formal, and you kind of put on your, your announcer voice, like yeah. This month, what's going on in the company? Whereas when you're sending an email, that's very informal. It's, it's just like having a chat. So it's kind of a mindset difference there as well, that emails just are more relaxed, more informal.
Yeah, agreed.
More personable.
Very nice. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks everyone for joining us as well. That was really, really nice. There's loads of compliments in the chat box.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everybody. And thank you so much for inviting us as well.
It is a pleasure. So what I'll do as well is, if anyone wants to sign up to your email list, I'll include that link in the follow-up email from that, so it'll be nice and easy for everyone to click on that.
Wonderful.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Angie.
Thanks a million, guys.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Much. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, Frank. Marci.
Thank you. I recognize that voice. Thanks, Rita.